Greetings from Wine Country, everyone. This is Mark Blanchard of Blanchard Family Wines with another episode of Decanted, our talk show where we like to open up the conversation. And I'm really excited about today's guest. He is a very good friend. He is a writer, a filmmaker, obstacle course race junkie, and an overall kind of Renaissance man. One of the most interesting people I know. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Scott Keneally. Scott, greetings, sir. Thank you so much for taking some time with me.
That's quite the intro. Thanks. I'm happy to be here.
Well, you know, I got to hype you up here properly. I really appreciate you taking some time to chat with me here and to drink some wine. You ready to drink some wine?
Yeah, sure am.
Absolutely. Let's jump right into the first wine before we dig too deep into the conversation. I don't know about you. I already got the first wine in my glass. You ready to start tasting? Oh, fantastic.
Yep.
So we're going to start with the Sparrow Alice white wine, which is a Sauvignon Blanc Viognier blend. And this wine is named after my 4-month-old daughter, my second child, my little baby girl. Couldn't be more excited about bringing a girl into my family and introducing this new wine. So cheers to you, sir.
Cheers.
Well, first of all, what do you think of the wine? You enjoying it?
I am a huge fan of all of your wines, especially the 3 that we've selected for this podcast.
Well, and I'm excited about the 3 wines that you selected as well. And Scott, you've had many of my wines over the years. And those of you that are viewing at home, Scott and I have been friends for many years here. So of my guests that I've had so far, I've interviewed people from Minnesota, Colorado, Tennessee, Oregon. But Scott, you are coming from Healdsburg. You are in my town here in Healdsburg, and we have been friends here in Healdsburg for many years. And you've always been not only a great friend, but one of my more interesting friends. So I know you are a very humble individual, and you don't like to really brag about your past projects, your career. But I do have to brag for you for just 1 second and let everyone that is watching this know a little bit about your background. I mean, you are an incredible, writer and filmmaker. You've written commercials, music videos. You've worked with the likes of Rihanna, Madonna, Katy Perry, Miley Cyrus. You've had a pretty interesting career. But when you and I first started becoming friends, there was a really interesting project that you started working on that I want to dig right into right off the bat. The first topic conversation, I want to talk a little bit about how you discovered the world of obstacle course racing and how that led to a really pivotal point in your career. So first of all, what is obstacle course racing for those of you that are watching this that might not know? And how did you discover that scene in that world?
I'm assuming most of the viewers will have heard of a Tough Mudder or Spartan race, these paramilitary style obstacle course races that feature mud, electricity, fire, barbed wire, burpees, ice. And I saw this phenomenon happening. We had a mutual friend, Scott Loveland, who showed me a promo video for Tough Mudder, and it looked terrifying. And as a humorist, as a writer, I thought this would be a really good subject for an essay. So I set off to Squaw Valley and did a Tough Mudder. It was horrifying and awesome and really empowering. And it was a 10-mile race up and down Squaw Valley. It was really quite a challenging experience. But I saw something pretty special in there. I worked on an essay, wrote a humor essay, which ended up on the cover of our local alt weekly, The Bohemian. But more importantly, when I was researching the history of Tough Mudder, I uncovered a scandal, which it's just sort of went down the rabbit hole, ended up getting really deep into this, wrote a investigative feature, which was on the cover of Outside Magazine, which led to an assignment with 60 Minutes, producing a segment called Races from Hell. And I helped out with that. And at some point, became captivated by the man who was screwed over by Tough Mudder, the tragic hero of the obstacle race industry.
Mr. Mouse, right?
Mr. Mouse, this guy, yeah. And I decided to make a documentary. Initially, it was supposed to be about Mr. Mouse, a celebration of him, and because he's such a fascinating character. But ultimately, it grew into a larger film about the the reasons behind this like tremendous movement where millions of people are suddenly paying, you know, $200 on weekends to do the very thing we've been trying to avoid for millennia.
Right.
Like getting shocked and muddy and exposed to the elements and in situations where we're scared or in tight spaces. So I ended up making a movie called Rise of the Sufferfest.
Well, I do have a surprise for you here. I got a couple of surprises. You didn't know this was coming. So first of all, this is the Outside Magazine issue. I still have this. And I was really proud of myself for digging this up. This was in my office at the winery. I still have this. And I remember when this came out, and I remember you and I talking before this had been published. And you were telling me all about this project and how you had discovered this sort of controversy about how, you know, the whole American obstacle course race scene was basically stolen from this British gentleman, Mr. Mouse, and how you had really, you know, dug deep into this world. And it became, I mean, you know, I don't think you mind me saying this, it became kind of an obsession of yours for a little while. And it turned into this amazing article. And before this even came out, I remember you and I were hanging out at a bar in Healdsburg, and you were telling me all about it. You were so enthusiastic, and I was so enthralled by this. And do you remember this conversation? Do you remember this?
Yeah,
night?
I think I do.
And there was something, I could tell your enthusiasm, and I could tell this was something big. This was something beyond, you know, a throwaway project for you. And I remember specifically telling you something. Do you remember what that was?
I do not.
I told you, I said, Scott, this is going to change your life.
It did.
I remember thinking, like, this is going to be big. Like, this isn't going to be just something you do briefly. And this is long before Rise of the Sufferers, your documentary was really, I think, even, you know, a notion. It was before the article had come out. And I remember thinking, like, Scott, this is going to change your life. And, well, I mean, my next question for you is, how did it change your life?
In every which way. Before this, there's a humorist, A.J. Jacobs, who I have been obsessed with forever. He sort of just tackles small little topics, writes essays on them. Although he has some meteor projects like The Year of Living Biblically, which was a bestseller, and in which he tried to follow the Bible like to a T for a year. So for me, Tough Mudder initially was just a one-off humorous essay. As I uncovered the scandal, just that story took a long time to report and write because it was this evolving like business scandal. And by the end of that, I was like really involved in it and felt I had met a lot of people in the community. I had done a lot of the races. I understood the transformative power of these events. And I mean, I can't really imagine my life without that experience.
Yeah.
Through going through this rabbit hole of making a film, I mean, this, instead of these one-off essays, this became nearly a decade of my life that I was focused on this world. So for me, it was really gratifying to sink my teeth into something, feel like could be the voice of this space. And I've since written for Rolling Stone and like a cover profile for Men's Journal, multiple pieces for Outside. So if there was a beat writer for this space, it you know, I'm that guy. And so it was nice. It felt very meaningful to find a corner, a fold of this wonderful world in which I could sort of own.
Well, for a while there, you really were sort of the voice of that world. I mean, you were you know, at least from a journalism standpoint, you really were kind of the voice of that world. And then it came to, you know, fruition as this amazing documentary. And I was at one of the premieres of the documentary, which I was really honored to be invited to that and to be able to, you know, be one of the first people to see the documentary. Now, thousands of people have seen the documentary. And those of you that are watching this, if you have not watched it yet, Rise of the Sufferfest, it's a really interesting documentary because I feel like when you started making it, you maybe had one vision, and then what it became was something maybe unexpected, because it really was this journey. And I think, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, you maybe had an idea in the beginning, but then the idea grew into something so much more, because it really turned into a personal journey and you know, a very introspective sort of documentary. And it was about the controversy, and it was about the world, and it was about you. I mean, it turned into something so much more than I imagine you expected it would in the beginning.
Yeah, I wouldn't have, at least at the beginning, wished this journey upon anybody.
Right.
Because my initial vision for this would be just a straight up PBS style documentary about the phenomenon itself. I had these grand visions for a viral Kickstarter campaign, which ended up being more of a non-starter, in which I raised about 9% of my $297,000 goal, which of course, in retrospect, was preposterous. I had never made a movie. And though the movie ended up costing, roughly that much with marketing, there was no way that my friends and strangers are going to support me and throw $300,000 towards this.
Right.
So the movie, because it took a longer period of time, a lot of things happened in my life that it made sense, in which it shifted from just a sociological documentary to a personal journey. And by the end of it, I sort of blended those two. Through that time, I had this catastrophic failure with Kickstarter. I quit a 3-mile Spartan race, which was a real low point. I walked off this course in shame. And I also had a kid, which I was pretty terrified about fatherhood. So these sort of forces all met mid-documentary. And by the end of it, when I had found a production partner who believed in this, and this company in Los Angeles, they really encouraged me to make this a personal story or have my narrative be the sort of through line throughout the film.
Well, I feel very privileged that personally, through our friendship, kind of witnessed this journey you went through. And it really was, I think, very transformative for you as an artist, as a writer, and as a person. And I feel very privileged that I kind of witnessed you go through this journey. And I think it did, change you and had an impact on your life. And, you brought up the point of one of the themes of the documentary that I thought was the most poignant and really impactful was this idea that you alluded to a moment ago. Why would modern humans that live in comfortable society, basically spoiled by modern comforts, why would they pay to torture themselves? Why would they pay to get electrocuted, to suffer? And I found that really fascinating. And it was, obviously a commentary on the obstacle course race community, but a commentary on life in the world. And I think that clearly had an impact on you personally. And we're going to go to wine number 2. And this is, of course, going to transition to our next subject. But before we go to that, just kind of one last bit about, the obstacle course race world and Rise of the Sufferfest. Why did you personally get drawn to this idea? I mean, you got a comfortable life. You're married. You got kids. You got a good career. Why did you want to torture yourself?
Well, narcissism was like my entry point into this space. And I think it is for a lot of people. For me, it was like this idea I could write a humorous essay. And luckily, I had my face plastered on the Bohemian or Alt Weekly. And so for me, it was like the idea of, touting myself in a sense. Like humble bragging is a big, oh my God, I can't believe how horrible this race was. But you put your picture on Facebook looking like Rambo, and
right.
It's a great post where you're shitting on yourself a little bit. And then also by virtue of the fact you have this epic shot of you're bragging. So for me, I think, and a lot of people, this sort of entry point is a bit of ego. But what drew me in really was the community and strangers helping strangers over obstacles, and the sort of connection to the earth, to others, this opportunity to feel like a child again. All these things were like competing factors and forces encouraging me to dive in deeper.
Well, I feel like it sparked something in you, this sort of animal instinct, you can call it, this sort of primitive desire to challenge yourself. And I feel like that snowballed into something much, much more, which I learned about you just recently, reconnecting with you, that I couldn't be more excited to talk about this new chapter in your life. Can you tell me how, the desire to challenge yourself through these obstacle course races, and again, literally torturing yourself for fun almost, led to this new path in your life, which is you are currently a volunteer firefighter.
This is true. All right. So when I first started Tough Mudder, before I did my first race, I would classify myself as a wimpy white guy, a beta male who decided to like rip himself off the couch to challenge himself.
Yeah.
Through the course of that experience of making the film and being really immersed in that space, I ended up tackling races that were profoundly challenging. Tough Guy in England, which is, I did that 5 years in a row and ended up quitting the last year. It's an 8-mile race at the end of January where it's freezing cold, bitter winds, sleeting, you're breaking through ice. And it is a torturous it depends on how fast you are. For me, it's always 2.5 hours or more of just deeper stages of hypothermia. The Spartan Beast or World Championship at Lake Tahoe, which I may do again at the end of September, later this month. That's like a 16-mile race up and down Squaw. And it is horrifying. You're swimming in an alpine lake and your whole like core temperature is getting like beaten down lower and lower. And it's a really challenging race. Most importantly, I did World's Toughest Mudder 2 years, and that was a 24-hour race in the Las Vegas desert, or desert outside Vegas. And the first year I ended up going 50 miles and hysterically crying as soon as I crossed that finish line. After 25 hours, you're allowed to. 20 hours. Didn't get a chance to take a nap or a break. I was just moving the whole time. And like the longest break was 15 minutes, but it was such a transformative experience where I realized I had a lot more in me than I thought possible. So cut to, I think it was the Kincaid fire, which was maybe the second time I was evacuated in 3 years.
Yeah. Was that 2018?
19, I believe.
19.
And
it's hard to keep track of them these days.
I know, right?
In a sad
and
way.
So there was this living in Sonoma County and being evacuated year after year. Like what I've traditionally done is like, I think it was the Kincaid fire where 250,000 people were evacuated out of Sonoma County. And the first night I went to a friend's house in Healdsburg, and then Healdsburg was evacuated. And then went to a friend's house in Santa Rosa. Santa Rosa was evacuated. And there's this helplessness, this like overwhelming feeling of helplessness, which I ended up just like drinking with friends and sitting on my iPhone, like constantly looking for updates, looking at the news. And it was this really disempowering feeling. And so I feel like I learned some things in the mud. Like I learned that I guess I felt like I should apply some of the things I learned about myself doing Tough Mudder to real life, and not only sort of my own peace of mind, feeling like I'm part of the solution or I'm involved, but also it's an asset to the community to have more bodies out there helping out. So I went through Volunteer Academy last fall, finished it up in the spring, and I am standing by, ready to help.
That's amazing. And by the way, we are drinking some Jackson James Zinfandel now here. I didn't want to interrupt because you were on a roll there, and I'm so fascinated to hear a little bit more about what you're doing as a volunteer firefighter, because anyone that lives in this community knows that for the last 4 or 5 years, living under the threat of fire has kind of defined our community in a lot of ways, kind of defined our lives. We live under the threat of evacuation. I've explained this to customers, to tourists that come to the tasting room, and they're always asking, this is something, Scott, that I think you'll find kind of morbidly humorous. The question I always get, and exactly, you know this question. The question I always get was, were you affected by the fires? I don't know how to. Everything was affected. Did my house burn down? No. Did my winery burn down? No. Was I affected? Everyone was affected. All aspects of life were affected. Our community, our families. Everyone knows someone whose house burned down. Everyone knows someone whose business burned down. Everyone is 1 or 2 degrees separation away from someone who maybe lost their lives. everyone has a certain level of almost like PTSD dealing with these fires. And you took that and you were inspired to do something about it, which is really admirable and amazing. Again, thank you. First of all, thank you for what you're doing, but more importantly, what are you doing? I mean, let's enlighten some of the people that don't know what it is to live in this world that we live in, where, we all know how to pack evacuation bags in the middle of the night in 10 seconds. We all know how to evacuate our homes in a brief notice. We all have Nixle alerts on our phone. But you've taken it a step further and gotten really involved. What is going on? What are you doing? What is your role right now?
All right. So I'll say my passion for getting into fire services was always wildfire, because that's what affected me.
Yeah.
And so I remember, my first 24-hour shift at the firehouse, we were on a controlled burn up in West Dry Creek. And at about 5, which all day long, and at about 5 p.m., we got a medical call for a single, it was a fatality on Dry Creek Road, a 20-year-old kid who lost control. And for a few hours, I was there with, we were first on scene, and it was just a really difficult experience for me. And it sort of made me really respect firefighters who do this for a living. I mean, firefighters are generally the first responders. They're first on scene almost always. And I never really was passionate or driven to medical calls, tragic accidents. So currently, and I was pretty deeply affected by it. And there's that's not for me. God bless you people who are doing that. How do I get involved with just wildfire stuff? That's where my passion is. And we have a really progressive station, Northern Sonoma County Fire Protection District. Chief Marshall Tuberville is a legend in the fire services, and he sees the value in having a lot of wildland firefighters, and I don't have to spend the 24 hours at the station, because I'm not going to be on structure fires or medical calls. So
yeah. Currently,
I'll say my vision for this shifted. I ended up getting my first full-time job ever in May. And I'm copywriting for Microsoft. If I had not gotten that, my plan from all summer and fall would have been to be on strike teams going around the state. I'd be in Tahoe right now or wherever. And I had been shooting things, following my journey through the fire services, thought it might be a decent follow-up documentary. But universe, stars aligned to have this different job. And so now currently I'm just sort of on standby. We're not really in the thick of fire season yet in Sonoma County, even though we have vegetation fires every single day.
Yeah.
What we don't have right now are the Diablo winds. And so we're not really in red flag season. So to answer your question, what are we doing now? What we've been doing is a lot of prescribed burns. So going on properties, we'll have, multiple units and teams working on burning off stuff, older vegetation. And so I've been involved in a lot of those. And I'm just sort of hoping for a miracle this season that nothing happens in Sonoma County, but willing to throw down as soon as something does.
Isn't that a sad fact that we live in, that it's not a matter of, is there going to be fires or not? We're just prepared for it, and we're hoping for the best. We're hoping for a miracle, that it won't be as bad as past years. It won't be as close to our town. But if Sonoma County, if the surrounding Healdsburg area catches on fire the way it has in past years, are you going to be on the front line? Are you going to be there?
Absolutely.
That's astounding and frightening to me. And I have friends that are firefighters. My 2.5-year-old son is completely and utterly obsessed with firefighters. They are the superhero, mythical figures to him, as they should be. In Sonoma County, no one is a bigger hero than a firefighter these days. In fact, for someone like yourself who has had a career where you've hung out with celebrities, you've hung out with movie stars, you've hung out with rock stars, is there something about hanging out with these frontline, first responding, firefighter heroes? I mean, how do you compare that to hanging out with, celebrities as far as your sort of starstruck admiration?
That's a great question. I think I fangirl out hanging around Chief Marshal Tuberville way more than hanging out with Paris Hilton or anyone like that.
Right?
My values have shifted, and maybe when I was in my 20s on a Jessica Simpson or Katy Perry set, I may have had a same amount of feeling electrified. But at this stage of my life, it's these men and women who are out there, and you sort of value the discomfort you feel when you're getting evacuated, the uncertainty, is Healdsburg going to burn down? Am I going to lose my house? It really sort of snaps things into focus, and your values shift. They did for me anyway. So I really appreciate being around the various personalities at the station, the people I've met through this. I just have a lot of respect and awe and admiration for them.
Absolutely. So let's move on to the cab here, wine number 3. And I think it's a great transition because this is a wine that we referred to. This is our 2017 Cash Island cab. This is a wine we refer to in kind of behind the scenes here. We refer to it as the fire wine. 2017, as you recall, was the first year of what turned into 4 straight years of record-breaking fires. I mean, when 2017 hit, we broke all forest fire records in California. Thousands of structures burned. I think it was something like 40 lives lost. It was the most devastating fires ever. And unfortunately, we basically topped that for the 3 years after that. But 2017 was a very harrowing year because we didn't have people like yourselves, doing the controlled burns and really staying on top of things. I feel like in 2017, when the fires hit, it came out of nowhere, and we kind of weren't prepared. I mean, it was crazy. If you remember, it was unprecedented. No one was ready for it. God willing, hopefully we're ready this year for anything that happens. But I remember in 2017, we were evacuating, and then we came back, and then we evacuated again, and we came back. And I remember basically trying to make this, pardon me here, my cord fell out of my computer. I don't want to lose power. So in 2017, all these fires happened during harvest. We were trying to make wine. We were trying to, live, right? During these fires, we were trying to still harvest. We were trying to make wine. We were trying to function. And this cab we made in between evacuations. We evacuated one day, came back, picked the grapes, crushed the fruit, and then evacuated the next day. It was in the middle of evacuations, in the middle of these tragic fires. And I remember with this wine, the owner of the vineyard, Alexander Valley, I mean, there were fires everywhere around Alexander Valley, smoke just billowing over the hills. And I remember my winemaker and myself, we go out to this vineyard to meet the owner and we had to drop off the picking bins and kind of prep for the harvest, and basically telling them okay, we're going to drop off these bins. We're going to go evacuate now. If the fire doesn't make it over the hill there and the winds shift and everything's safe and you're able to pick these grapes, you call me in the morning and tell me what time, harvest happens. Tell me what time the grapes are coming. If the wind shifts in the other direction and the fire makes it over that hill, God bless you and your family. Good luck. I mean, that's where we left it. I mean, that's how crazy it was, if you remember. It really was this kind of roll of the dice, we're going to make it through the night or we're not. And we were able to make it through the night. We were able to pick these grapes. We were able to make this wine. And to me, this wine is a constant reminder. The reason why we call it the fire wine, and the reason why I bring up this story, is it's a constant reminder of what this community went through, what our town went through, what the wine industry went through, what you and I went through, in basically overcoming the tragedy, the adversity, coming together and continuing to make wine to save our town, to save our community. And I think this wine is not a reminder of the tragedy of the fire. For me, this wine is a reminder of what our community is made of. To me, this wine is a reminder of what Healdsburg is made of, what wine country is made of, what the men and women, the first responders, what they went through to overcome all these challenges. And again, 4 years straight, you know, how much pride do you have in being part of this community and being a part of Healdsburg?
You know, to call back to what was the moment in which I felt like really compelled to join fire services. There's one specific moment. It was after Healdsburg had been evacuated for, this is the Kincaid fire. We were evacuated for a while, and there was a Halloween celebration that happened. I think it was like November 9th or 11th. It was, there's no one in Healdsburg on Halloween. So there was a sort of celebration in the plaza, and there were fire trucks surrounding the plaza and firemen giving out candy to trick-or-treaters. And I remember like parking a few blocks away, walking up, hearing the music, and then seeing the fire trucks and feeling such like an intense gratitude.
Yeah.
There were like pride and like these people who helped avert disaster, and just humbled and feeling like these are the real superheroes. Like it was this sort of moment where you're like, God bless that. Because I know 2017 there were fires surrounding, but for me it was, you know, the Kincaid in which we thought we might lose Healdsburg. So, but I remember like, you know, 2017 was that year in which is the first real experience with wildfire and Sonoma Strong and sort of community rallying together. And this sort of, we're in this together. That post 9/11, that tragedy has struck, and we're just recalibrating and in general, we recalibrate together, and we're close together, and we all have been through something, whether it's an obstacle race or where we've gone through something, an ordeal together. And it's a really powerful, community oriented and, you know, experience. And so I'm happy you made this wine. I'm happy you got to pick these grapes and that your shit didn't burn down.
Right. No, I mean, really, it's just that reminder of this collective tragedy that we went through that really did bring us together. The day we crushed these grapes, the whole town was empty, pretty much evacuated. And I remember the fruit came in, and I had to send like the mass text message out to anyone I knew, kind of saying like, who's in town, who didn't evacuate, who can help me crush. And I had friends that came, and you know, the town was empty, and, you know, friends showed up, and, you know, I just had random people at the winery, and we were like drinking wine and crushing grapes and having this moment of saying, the fire didn't win. It didn't beat us. We're still here making wine. And I felt like it was this moment of recognizing that we will overcome. We can come together. We can beat this tragedy because our community is stronger. And I feel like that sentiment has remained for years. For years, there's been this sentiment around here of like, the fire won't win. You can burn down, you know, our houses, you can burn down our businesses, but we'll overcome. We'll come back. We'll rebuild. And I think that's, you know, I think a testament to the community we live in. In fact, a question for you here. In all your years, I mean, you're not from California. I'm not from California. I'm from Illinois. You're from New Jersey, right? Mm-hmm. What is it about living in Healdsburg? It's a wine community. You're not in the wine industry, though, but it's also a community of artists and chefs and just, you know, creative, interesting people. What is it about this community that you think inspires you and kind of feeds, you know, your drive and your artistic inspirations?
One of the more powerful moments of community in which I felt really grateful to live here was my friend Rhiannon drowned in Costa Rica in 2011, I believe. And I know her. I remember feeling like if you lived in New York City or whatnot, you know, a finite number of people. And I feel like when Ree passed, there was a huge, like, amount of support that her loved ones received from people who were close to us, and also people just like sort of tangentially touched by her, whether it was a yoga class or whatnot. And so and then like when you see people who get sick and there's meal trains, it just feels like there's a great big Healdsburg hug that happens. And that's just part of it. There's also I'm inspired by people here. I am constantly meeting people like yourself, like various friends of ours and others who are doing really cool stuff.
Yeah.
I always like used to joke, it was like Paris in the 20s. Like Healdsburg has felt like Paris in the 20s. There's a lot of very passionate, artistic people who are thriving in one industry or another, and people who surprise you all the time. So yeah. I love this place, and I've been here, you know, aside from the fact I remember being like, Healdsburg, what a weird name of a place. I was living in Venice Beach at the time when I first came up here. And before long, I was living here, and I've been in and around Healdsburg for the past 16, 17 years.
Well, I have one more surprise for you here as we'll wrap up here soon. And I could talk to you for hours, but I have one more surprise for you here. I'm sure you were surprised that I had the Outside magazine show, right? This one's really going to blow your mind.
Totally. Oh, there we go.
This is the Bohemian cover from when you got the Tough Mudder cover, but this one specifically, so I'm not sure if you can see it. You might not even remember this. You signed this for me. So I got this. I went to whatever, local, grocery store, liquor store, whatever, to get the copy of the Bohemian because I knew you were on the cover. And I got you to sign it. You signed it here. It says, Mark, friends like you are why I call Healdsburg home. That's always stuck with me. And the reason why I wanted to talk about really sort of I wanted to end this conversation with, what it means to be a part of this community is, what you said here in this quote here, because, friends like you are obviously why I like to call Healdsburg home. And I think you and I are really lucky to live in this home and in this community. I know I am very lucky to know you and to know people like you and to be a part of this community. And, it's been such an honor and a privilege, seeing, your career develop over the years of our friendship. And it's really been an honor and a privilege to talk to you here today and hear your stories. I can't thank you enough for joining me. And, let's just do one last cheers here. I always like to end these shows with some inspiring words. And I feel like, we've talked about this idea of how here in Sonoma County, here in Healdsburg, we've gone through this collective tragedy together and how it's made our community stronger and how it's made Healdsburg and its people stronger. And my hope is that the collective tragedy that the world has gone through over the last year and a half, the collective tragedy of pandemic times and COVID, I really hope that it can inspire us to come together and come out stronger. And I've witnessed it firsthand in our community with Years of Fires. And I really hope that the world can kind of follow suit and come out of this collective tragedy even stronger. And it's people like you that are going to make that possible. So thank you for all the work you're doing as a volunteer firefighter. Thank you very much for, being a part of our community. Those of you that are at home, check out Rise of the Sufferfest. It's a really, really fascinating documentary. And Scott, I cannot thank you enough for your time and your stories. This has been a joy. So cheers to finding your community and finding ways to come out even stronger.
Thanks, Mark.
Scott. Thank you so much. Those of you at home, thank you very much for watching another episode of Decanted. Like and subscribe. Scott, again, thank you so much for joining me and taking the time. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Mark Blanchard. This has been Decanted. We definitely opened up a great conversation here. We'll see everyone next time. Cheers.